Good evening, everybody. Welcome. We are live from Books and Books here in Coral Gables. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope everybody's comfortable. I know it's a little warm in here, but I just got the latest weather report. Don't worry, we're getting a cold front. It's going down to 92. To our internet audience watching, if at any time during tonight's presentation you'd like to order a copy of the book, you may do so by calling the number on your screen, and we'll send you a book for no charge for the shipping. We'll get it autographed by Jim before the night's over. There's so many things I could say about Jim. He's a great friend of the store. He's been here so many times. If I talked about all the backlist titles I have on sale by him at the counter, we'd be here all night. So we'll just concentrate on this month's title. I got it. Cash Landing. He's a great friend of the store, as I say. You can always watch the internet reproduction of this event if you go online, and you can also go to our website at booksandbooks.com and give us your email address, and we can send you emails for everything that goes on here at the store. There are a lot, so you'll never be lonely with the amount of emails we send you, but we do send enough so that there's something for everybody. But I will say that the New York Times bestselling author of Cain and Abe and Black Horizon blends Goodfellas and Elmore Leonard in this wild, suspenseful caper inspired by actual events in which a band of amateur thieves pulls off one of the biggest airport heists in history with deadly consequences. With no further ado, please welcome Jim Grippando.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out. It's always great to start the tour at Books and Books. For those of you who are Facebook friends, I found today an old photograph of the very first book signing I did at Books and Books. So if you want to check that out on my Facebook page, it's pretty amazing that in 21 years now, and 23 novels in 21 years, and it's still just as exciting. But you know, we can kind of take it for granted also that we have such a great bookstore like Books and Books, because now that I go on tour, every city I go to there's one more great bookstore that's closed. So let's support Books and Books as much as we can and have great events like this. So Cash Landing came out Tuesday, so it is brand spanking new. And it's a little different for me because, well, as you kind of read from, if you've read the introduction here, it's sort of based on a true story. I'm not going to say it's true crime at all. It's inspired by actual events. Sometimes I think all fiction is sort of inspired by actual events, but this one was pretty strange in the sense that I actually could have written this as a true crime novel. Next one, babe. Got it? And this kind of tells you what why I was so caught up with this true crime story. It reads like a movie script, only this was no blockbuster action film. It was a real-life crime drama straight from the streets of Miami. That's not a review of the book, and that's not something I wrote. Next one. Believe it or not, that's from the FBI's website. They have an entire page on their website devoted to they're solving this crime that occurred in 2005. And that's not how I found out about it, though. How I found out about this heist that is the focus point of Cash Landing is a federal judge came to me. And you can imagine that once you get at a certain point in your career, you have people coming up to you all the time and saying, I've got this great idea for a novel, and all you've got to do is write it. And okay, we'll split it 50-50, and you'll do the Today Show, and I'll do Good Morning America, and they've got it all figured out, right? And I know they have known nothing about writing if they think all I've got to do is write it. I have an idea file that is this thick, and I won't live long enough to write all the novels that I have ideas for. So when people come up to me and say that, I kind of say, great, you know what? Go to it. Sit down. It's the discipline of writing that separates the dreamers from the writers, and I want you to be a writer. So sit down and start writing. So twice in my life, there were exceptions to that. Once was, I don't know what came over me, but a guy came up to me and Does anybody here remember an old bookstore called Liberty's in Boca Raton? No, it's ancient history. But it was a great store, just like this one. I wrote a book called The Abduction, which is it was a story of the first woman to run for president, and she was running against a black man. And interestingly enough, I'm really digressing here, but the reviews really read something like this: great book, but you're really going to have to suspend disbelief if you think this country is ready for, a black man running against a white woman. So 10 years later, so I was prescient, I guess, in that regard. So anyway, the guy comes up to me after the signing and says, so I've got this great idea. And I put down my pen and thought, okay, what's your idea? And I think I startled him because he's probably approached dozens of other authors and they've all kind of said, no, thank you. And he said, okay, there's this really mean president. I'm like, okay. And then he looks at me like maybe I didn't hear him. He goes, there's this really mean president. That was it. That was his idea, okay? So if ever I write a book about a really mean president, I'm sure I'll hear from his lawyer. So that 15 years later, I made another exception when someone came to me and said, you've got to write this book. This is great. And the reason I listened is because it was federal judge Paul Huck. Paul Huck's been in U.S. District Court for about 10 or 12 years, and before that he was a trial lawyer and practiced with a man named Bill Frates, who's sort of legendary in Miami's legal community. He's a trial lawyer among trial lawyers. And so I thought, so he'd been in Miami since the 1960s, and I thought, if he comes to me, Judge Huck comes to me and says, this is unlike any other case I've ever come across in my life, I thought, okay, this is worth listening to. So let's see. Let's hit the next one there, honey. Okay. So anyway, he says to me, well, first of all, you know about the money flights, right? And I was already intrigued because I didn't. He says, well, yeah. I mean, every Sunday afternoon, there is a Lufthansa 747 that leaves Frankfurt, regular commercial flight. The passengers are completely unaware of the fact that there is anywhere from $80 to $100 million in cash in the cargo belly of the jet, because the banks in Germany don't need all these $50 and $100 bills, right? So hit the next one, hon. So what happens is they gather up all this cash on a weekly basis. Commerce Bank happened to be the bank involved in this situation, and they ship the money in all the way to Miami, because Miami is a very cash-driven community, as you know. I mean, every time I can't tell you, if you don't pay in cash, everybody says, "Oh, make the check out to cash," So right, so it's just the way business is done here. So. And the Miami airport, as you can see from the map, is just basically an expressway ride of 4 miles from the airport to over here is where, in Doral, is where the Federal Reserve branch is in Miami. So all the money is taken from the plane and then taken to a warehouse. Hit the next one. Got it? Okay. So, and it's the job of these guys who are work for Brinks to take this cash from the plane to the warehouse where it has to clear customs. Now, what's interesting, I did a little research. One of the things you have to do as a thriller writer is you've got to be able to, first of all, you got to like research. Second of all, you got to be able to cut it from the book because it doesn't advance the story. But one of the interesting things I discovered that didn't make it into the story, but I'll share it with you, is that Brinks does this 250 times a day. Not this much money, but moving this kind of money that is traveling by plane to another place. Okay, so this is a lot of dough, 80 to 100 million. And the other thing that's really interesting is that the Federal Reserve moves about $600 billion a year this way. So you're thinking about these rivers of cash, right? And what's even more amazing to me is you don't really hear about that many heists. You really don't, because it doesn't happen that often. It really doesn't. And the other thing that's sort of remarkable about this story I'm going to share with you is that when it does happen, it's usually pretty violent. There was a guy a driver in Pittsburgh whose partner couldn't resist the $2.5 million they were carrying and shot him in the back of the head and took off with the money. And 4 thugs in Maryland who shot a driver in the face to take the money. It's usually gruesome when they do that. It's very unusual for it to be pulled off in broad daylight and without a shot being fired. So the bags are shipped in. It's $2 million. Each bag is $2 million. So in this case, that Judge Huck was telling me about, it was $88 million. So do the math. I guess 44 bags of $50 and $100 bills. Next one, sweetie. Okay. So this Brinks, I don't know what they make, but they probably don't make a lot of money. It's a pretty high-risk job in some ways because, like I say, even though it's not a risk every day, but it's pretty risky. If something happens, you better be prepared. So this guy was working this shift and discovered some security lapses. Imagine that at the airport. So it's interesting because this book came out on June 2nd about the biggest airport heist in history, and June 1st. The headline in the New York Times was the head of the TSA was fired because they ran that test, and 67 out of 70 tests that they ran, they were able to sneak weapons, through the airport. So in this case, this was 2005 when this crime happened. The security guard's looking around. He's like, okay. They've got the bills laid out on the floor to clear customs. They got to open each bag to see what's in there, make sure there's no drugs or whatever they're looking for. And the other interesting thing is that the security guards for Brinks are armed guards, but because they're not customs agents, they have to take off their weapons when they're in a customs environment. So nobody's armed. And even more incredibly, best of all, I guess if you're planning a heist, is that the warehouse has these big gaping doors on both sides, the front axis and the rear axis. Well, the rear doors open to Perimeter Road, if you know the area out there, over by Aero Squadron and all of that, which means you don't even have to be checked by the security guard at the exit to the airport. You just, boom, you're right on Perimeter Road, and then boom, you're on 836, and you're gone. Yeah. So the Brinks guard thinks this looks pretty good, but he doesn't really. These are not hardened criminals. This is a guy who's a security guard. So he's like, I don't really want to do this, but So he goes to his friend and says, okay, for an equal share of the money, I'll let you know when it's time. Okay, and you just bring your guys, and I don't care who they are. I don't even want to know who they are. This is too easy. This is too easy. So his friend is in. What's the next one? Maybe I'm ahead of myself, but anyway. Okay, so his friend rounds up 3 characters, which are like straight out of an Elmore Leonard book. I mean, it is that, sort of goofy. His 3 friends are, one of them is, and again, I'm not making this up. This is the true part of the story. This isn't my book. This is the part that was fed to me by the judge, is his uncle, Pinky, that's his name, okay? So, his brother-in-law, who is and I spoke to his lawyer, who said he's just the nicest, most naive person he's ever met in his life. He's 5'6" tall, 350 pounds, and had terrible cocaine addiction problems, and also loves strippers. So this is the group. This is the group that's going to go in and pull off the biggest heist in airport history since the famous 1978 heist that was the inspiration. Has anybody here seen the movie Goodfellas? Okay, everybody has. So you know the story behind that, and it's like that to this day is still the biggest heist, especially if you think of it in terms of real term dollars. That was $8 million, and I think in '78. So it's like the equivalent of almost $30 million by today's standards. So anyway, these guys show up. They've got a pickup truck. They've got one gun among the three of them. Two of the guys swore later on that they didn't even know that the other guy had a gun. So they just went in there with the pickup truck and gave themselves 90 seconds to grab as much money as they can. And I picked this picture because it actually, this is no exaggeration, literally what these guys didn't realize is how much a bag of $2 million weighs. You know, what do you think? You know, I mean, well, I had it up on there before, so that was the gift. It's almost 40 pounds, you know, per bag. And if you're trying to get your arms around it, and the one guy's still trying to hold on to his gun, you know, and so they grab as much as they can, and literally they dropped a bag on the way out, which, you know, can you imagine the conversation in the car afterward? It's like, you dropped $2 million, you know, it's like, you know, so they threw as much as they could into the back of the pickup truck, and the car, and believe it or not, guess who's the driver? The 400-pound coke addict is the driver, you know. So, and they get away. That's sort of the amazing thing, is that they got away, and their plan was to lay low, you know, because if you start flashing money, and that's what happened in Goodfellas, right? You know, it was like they started doing cocaine and drugs and this and that, and you know, and 11 people ended up dead. That was a pretty, you know, that was pretty violent movie. This one, so it's just the four of them at this point. Plus they had a lookout guy they had, and then another guy who they enlisted to get rid of the truck. So they ended up with like $1.6 million each, and they sealed it up in the vacuum packs and buried it in the yard in PVC pipe. So it was planned, you know, they did some thinking about this. So, but hit the next one, honey. That worked for a while. Okay. So who do you think cracked, right? So Jeffrey has always wanted a girlfriend, you know. So he goes to. This is a real place, actually. It's called the Gold Rush. And what was funny was I was on WLRN on Wednesday, and I couldn't think of the name of the strip joint. And I'm going like, it's gold. And Joseph Cooper goes, oh, the Gold Rush. And I'm like, you know, so I'm like, oh, yeah. How do you know? And well, as actually it turns out, is that the studio, a WLRN studio, is like right there at 15th Street in Biscayne, and this was right in that neighborhood. So he had driven by it all the time. So, yeah, that's what I said. Yeah. It was like one of those weird moments where Bonnie Berman is thinking, I learned something new today about you, you know. So Jeffrey starts flashing money like crazy, literally buying $20,000, $30,000 watches for strippers at the Gold Rush. And people start to realize, okay, something's changed in Jeffrey's life, okay? It's basically a guy who's never had any money at all, never had a job, couldn't hold a job, battled addiction, suddenly is on 3-day party binges with more money than, and you know, it's fallen out of his pockets. And also what happened at this point in time, when Jeffrey started flashing the money, Brinks offered a $150,000 reward. So so people were they were hoping to get a nibble, and they did. Somebody came forward and and so they identified not Jeffrey, but Jeffrey's brother-in-law, the leader of the group, named Carl. So the FBI got a wiretap on Carl's phone. And hit the next one. Let's see what's there. Okay. So the FBI, what's interesting is that the first phone conversation that they pick up is a ransom demand. Jeffrey's been kidnapped. And he's been kidnapped by, what happened was Carl was concerned that Jeffrey was going to get them all caught or killed. Because Carl's smart enough to know that other criminals prey on inexperienced, less hardened criminals who have money. So he's very afraid of this. So he hires a motorcycle gang. Brilliant. He hired literally 3 guys from a motorcycle gang to kidnap Jeffrey and put a scare into him. Well, the motorcycle gang turns on Carl, and it's a real kidnapping, and they demand $1 million ransom. So Carl pays it, and what do you think Jeffrey does? Jeffrey goes back to the strip joint that he got kidnapped from and gets kidnapped again, a second time. And so this is when the FBI is really like, this is, they're kind of like looking at each other like, this is crazy, how can this possibly be? But they've got a bit of a problem, and the problem is this: they want to find the money, right? And so they don't want to just swoop in and arrest these guys because, they'll tell them, oh, the money's gone, Probably Jeffrey's was. I mean, he'd already. Carl paid the $1 million ransom, but it was Jeffrey's money that he used to pay the ransom. And the other problem the FBI had was that they wanted to make sure they knew everybody who was involved. Right? They knew for sure they had like 4 or 5 guys here on the wiretap, but they wanted to make sure they had everybody. So, but it's a delicate balance because. The guys who kidnapped Jeffrey, this is where the story gets not funny at all. They're scary. They are really bad actors and did things to him that they didn't really need to do. I mean, basically all they had to do is threaten Jeffrey and he would have told them everything they wanted to know, but that's not the way they operate. They are really bad guys. So what's the next one say? Yeah, skip that one. That was Judge Huck, by the way. Okay. So the FBI, anyway, at some point the FBI realizes these are really bad actors, and they do have to swoop in because they're going to kill him. They really are. These are bad guys, and they are going to kill him, and the FBI doesn't want that to happen on their watch, so they swoop in and do it. So that's actually kind of where I haven't spoiled the book. I mean, that's sort of the first, 2 or 3 chapters of the book, because I kind of decided, well, that's really the story, and I didn't see that as a whole book. I needed it to be more complex than what I could just tell you in 15 minutes about this story, and there were certain avenues that were closed to me. These guys are all up for parole. They all got caught, basically, right? So the kidnappers went away for a long, long time, 35 years. The guys who did the heist went away from between 14, 15, 16 years. So they're up for parole in about a year or less now. So when I was trying to contact them through their lawyers, basically the message back to me, one of the lawyers was willing to talk. Jeffrey's lawyer was willing to talk to me. But the others were like, the last thing they need to do is to screw up parole by telling you something and make the police think that they know where the money is or something like that. So with that closed, I wanted the dialogue to be real. I wanted to know what they were saying to each other. I wanted to know what these guys were thinking when they showed up with, literally, handkerchiefs and one gun among the three of them, and Jeffrey's, going back to the same strip joint. So that was all closed to me, and so I decided I really wanted to make the story richer than I could as a work of nonfiction. So, and then the other thing was, what really hit me, there was a movie. Did anybody ever here see the movie Pain and Gain? Okay. I never saw it, but actually the private investigator who was, the real investigator who was protecting the victim here in that crime came to me at some point and told me, basically, here's the deal, okay? They kind of made the victim look like the jerk, is my understanding, and made the criminals look like lovable kind of, goofballs a little bit. And I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to inadvertently, shine someone in a light. And actually, this guy sued. He ended up suing Mark Wahlberg and everybody else because of the way the victim was portrayed in the movie. So hit the next one, honey. So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do this as a work of fiction. You can skip that one too. But I'll tell you my favorite joke. Okay, you can leave it. Okay. So what I wanted to explore was this whole idea of, greed. What did these characters think that this was going to solve in their lives? Why were they willing to take that big of a risk? And so all of those big questions that you have about what motivates people, I could explore in a work of fiction. So the other thing that I wanted to do with this book, just in the arc of the series, I write a series also. This book is not in the series. The main character is Jack Switek. He was introduced in my first book called The Pardon 21 years ago. And so Jack's been around for like 12 novels. And then he's now married to a woman named Andy Henning, who's an FBI agent who was introduced in a book called Under Cover of Darkness. I never really explained how the two of them met. And so I've been waiting for the right story to give people kind of a look into Andy's life before she met Jack. So this one worked perfectly because I decided and I'd never written a prequel before. And I like to stretch myself as a writer to do different things. So Cash Landing is Andy before she met Jack. She's the FBI agent who investigates this crime that happens at Miami International Airport. And all I'll tell you is that because all the reviewers have, I got really angry about this, but I'll tell you because they've all told it, is that Jack has an appearance in Cash Landing. So that's, which is kind of fun. So what's next, honey? Oh, the other thing that was interesting, 2005, if you go back in time, 2005 was sort of like, we all thought like, it's like we were all printing money back then, right? It was, our housekeeper had 3 condos, and I'm not exaggerating, what I wanted to do is, I wanted to make Ruben is the lead character who pulls off the heist. I wanted to make him a little sympathetic. So in the novel, he is someone who got crushed by this bursting bubble. So you almost kind of want to root for him a little bit for when he pulls off this heist. And so there's all kinds of, just think of, I'll take you down a memory lane here for a second. Quickly go through these, honey. Remember this one? Okay, October 2008, great day, right? We all lost about half of our 401k. Next one. Okay. And then there was this guy. Yes. Bernard Madoff, Ponzi scheme. Okay, next one. Okay, so I wanted to create a cast here that wasn't just a bunch of dummies like painting, not to trash somebody else's work, I wouldn't do that, but I wanted it deeper than that. I wanted really people to understand, to learn something about greed and self-interest and pie in the sky dreams and, well, and maybe a little bit about strippers too. So that was, okay. So you've got Andy, we've got Ruben. Oh, this was the other one, was I couldn't, the wife, Carl's wife, in real life, she got 3 years, but she was kind of an enigmatic character to me. And I did a lot of research for this. And I really, I couldn't tell you, even with all the research I did, I couldn't tell you if she knew in advance that they were going to try this, and I couldn't tell you where, in what point in time she definitely knew about it. So I seized that more as it was a problem, but I took it more as an opportunity to kind of figure, okay, I would like her to be, in my story, kind of the conscience of Ruben, someone who's like, you got to give the money back, that kind of thing, rather than just another co-conspirator in this. So it's a rich cast. It's a great plot that was kind of handed to me, and I think you'll enjoy it. So what's next? Anything? No, that's the inside of WLRN, in case you're wondering what it looks like. Yeah, so. Yeah, that's Joseph Cooper. So, and also it's freezing in there, I would tell you that. So, I'll take questions if anybody wants to ask anything. So, yeah.
How long did it take you to write this novel?
The question is, how long did it take me to write the novel? And not long at all. This is, I'm not going to continue at this pace, but in March 2014, Black Horizon came out. In January 2015, Cain and Abe came out. In June, Cash Landing releases. In November, I have a novella called The Penny Jumper comes out. And in March of 2016, the next Jack Switek novel comes out. So I don't know what that is, but it was crazy. So I basically wrote this novel in about 4 or 5 months, which takes all the fun out of it, I think. So I'm not going to continue at that pace at all. So, yeah.
Do you work 5 hours a day, 10 hours a day, 1 hour a day?
I'm pretty regular. I wouldn't say that I mean, at 10 hours writing, no. There's only so long you can be creative looking at a screen. So but I was pretty, at the time, my daughter was over at Miami City Ballet. So basically I would drop her off and then I would sit on Lincoln Road and I would write, for 3 or 4 hours. And that was sort of the routine. So, yeah. Yeah.
What changes have been made in the real-life transfer of money from Europe?
Yeah, he wants to know what real-life changes have been made in the transfer of money from Europe over to here. Now, I don't think much has been changed in the way they get it here, and you can't really get people to talk much about airport security. You get a lot of generalizations and statistics and that sort of things. But I'm betting that the back door of that warehouse does not open to the street anymore, and so, and probably the security cameras work. But the interesting thing is, when you think about this is not the priority of security. This is bags of money, right? And it's probably insured. What the focus of security is blowing up a plane of 250 passengers on it. That's really where the money goes to in security. So I wouldn't be a bit surprised if there were many of these vulnerabilities still exist, because it's just not it's not a priority. So yeah.
Exactly which the vulnerability was the money ever found?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I left that part out. Was the money ever found? The FBI recovered. They think they got away with 7.8 million, and the FBI recovered 1.2 million. So, and a lot of it got spent. There were clearly, but yeah, there were a lot of expenses. So on the Rolexes, right? Yes. So, so who knows? And the FBI thinks that they got everything that's findable, basically. But who knows? I mean, there may be.
They're waiting for them when they come out of jail.
Well, yeah, she says they're waiting until they come out of jail, and the FBI agent who led up the investigation says that may be true, and they may be watching these guys. But again, I kind of doubt it, because that's not really a priority of what the FBI. I mean, they want to track a terrorist. They're going to put some guy on a tail of Jeffrey, the cocaine addict. I don't think so. So yeah.
Was it a jury trial?
Was it? Oh, okay. Well, that's a good question too. Was it even a trial? He wanted to know if it was a jury trial. Yes, it was a jury trial for 2 of the kidnappers. All of the people involved in the heist pled guilty. So there was no trial. And 3 or 4 of the people involved in the kidnapping pled guilty. 2 of them went to trial, and they're the ones who went to trial are the ones who, ended up. One of them got a 34-year sentence, and the other one got a 26-year sentence or something like that. So, yep. Yeah.
How does one spend $1 million in $100 bills? I mean, you can't buy a $300,000 condominium with $100 bills.
No, you can't. And I don't think they really had he wanted to know, how do you spend that kind of cash? I'm repeating the questions because we're on this simulcast thing. So, they didn't really think that far down the road, I don't think, as how are we going to spend this? Are we going to launder it? What are we going to do with it? I think these were basically Carl worked for a construction company. Jeffrey didn't really have a job. The uncle, it was sort of in and out of small crimes, So I don't think they really thought about that. One of them bought a motorcycle for $14,000. Things like that. So, yeah.
I noticed that the character Henning, FBI agent.
Yeah.
I noticed that Ruben looks her up on the FBI's website.
Yeah.
Isn't this kind of unusual to be able to look up and see the faces of FBI agents? Or is this normal? Or?
Yeah. The question is, can you? I have a scene in the book where Andy is not really stalked, but a bad guy is kind of trying to find out information of her, and he checks the FBI website, and there she is. There are a few FBI agents that they select to feature, and it is true. Actually, if you were to go on the FBI and sort of, the FBI has this reputation of sort of being a boys' club, right? So, or did anyway for a time. So they really do like, for public relations purposes or whatever purposes they have, to feature the fact that there are opportunities for women in the FBI. So if you go on the website of the FBI, you will see there's like 3 or 4 women who
But you could look up more people. Would this put these people at risk?
Yeah, I think it would put them at risk. And so, and I guess that the ones that they choose probably are ones that aren't involved in the kind of activities that are, going to put them at serious risk. So, yeah.
Is Theo making an appearance in this?
Yeah, he wants to know about Theo. Theo is, if you don't know the series, this is a standalone novel. Cash Landing is, but the 12 of my 23 novels are written in the series, which is the same character. And what makes, I think, the series work and is the ensemble cast. So Jack starts out in The Pardon as a criminal defense lawyer who defends death row inmates, and Theo is the only client he ever had who was actually on death row and innocent. So, and they form this friendship, which is now continued throughout the series, and everybody wants to know about Theo because. And the funny thing is that all my friends think they are Theo because he's cool and he's the funny one, and he's yeah, it's true, right. So yeah, so the book I just finished, that's coming out in March of 2016, is the Jack Switek novel with Theo back in it. So yeah, so are we good? Or I think we got one. Well, let me ask someone who hasn't asked a question yet. There you go.
I noticed on one of your slides you had The Innocent Man, which was John Grisham's only nonfiction.
Yeah.
Is that part of why you didn't want to get sued?
Well, yeah, it was interesting. I didn't get into that, but it is that's kind of a little known fact. I mean, it's not a little known fact that John Grisham wrote a work of nonfiction, but the only one he's ever done, he ended up getting sued over it by the police officers who claimed they were portrayed in a false light in the story, and it's a story of an innocent man on death row, so like it happens. You know, we have a well, there's a few litigators here today, so you know we have a litigious society. You know, so yeah, I mean, obviously, if I had written this as a work of nonfiction, I wouldn't have written it in 4 or 5 months. I mean, there would have been fact checking. There would have been all of the things that you got to do to make sure that you have nailed down everything, and you can't even say, you know, well, you know, Jeffrey was thinking this when he went in there. Well, he wasn't. How do you know that? You know, how do you know what he was thinking? So yeah, I mean, that was, and I'm sure Grisham could afford quite a good lawyer, is my guess. So anyway, I hope you'll. I have. If you buy the book tonight from Books and Books, which I hope you do, because I know there are other places you can go to buy your books, but I will give you a free paperback if you buy it here tonight. So support your local bookstore. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
Folks, as I said at the top of the presentation, we have all of Jim's backlist behind the counter as well. He'll sign for you. For those of you watching online, don't forget to give us a call. I'm sorry you can't be here to enjoy the wonderful courtyard, music, restaurant, beer and wine we have out there. For those of you here, buy your books behind the counter. Jim's sitting right here. He'll sign them for you. Thanks, folks. Thanks for coming.